There's a pretty common complaint amongst a lot of Ashes of Creation players, especially the more casual types, that the leveling is too grindy, it's too boring, and that the game in general is not very casual friendly. The opinion of these players absolutely matters. However, there is an inconvenient truth, and that is that Intrepid is not going to be able to address the concerns of these players in the way I feel like a lot of them want their concerns addressed. What a lot of these players want is World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy leveling. They want a ton of quests, narrative driven, very fancy and sparkly and stories. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Intrepid cannot compete with World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy from a solo questing, narrative driven perspective. They just can't. Those games have got that so locked down. That is so expensive, such an arduous thing to do that. I will eat my shoe if Ashes of Creation has a map littered with story-driven quests that are avoided. It's just not going to happen. It's not in the scope of the game. And I'll be honest, I don't even think it's worth doing. That kind of content immediately is the first thing to not be relevant anymore. And it's just so much time and money to make that kind of content. I just don't think it's worth pursuing. And what's crazy is even if Ashes of Creation went and made all of these quests and filled the whole world full of solo narrative-driven quests, people would inevitably play it and say it's worse than World of Warcraft, worse than Final Fantasy, and it wouldn't actually meaningfully move the needle forward. So they're kind of stuck a little bit, but what I think they can do, and what I think is in the scope of the game, is they can have a banger main story quest. Just one mainline story quest that's really good, really polished, and really compelling. I think that is within the scope of the game, and they need something, because right now the story of the game, I don't even know really what it is. Like, we go to Vera because our old world sucks, and there's no main characters. There's no, like, what the fuck is happening? Like, what is it? Obviously, I know the vision of the game is that the players create the story, and it's all about the politics of the players, and every server is a little. I get that. But, like, there's not really an overarching story. I don't really know what's going on. I'm a fan of the game. I love the game, and I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But in the same vein, I think that story is not nearly as important for MMOs. Like, I loved WildStar. Story's stupid. New World story is unbelievably dumb, and I didn't quit the game because the story was bad. So, it matters, but it also kind of doesn't matter. Now, I personally don't mind that Ashes of Creation doesn't have a map littered with quests, because I am an MMORPG player that's been playing this genre for so long that I see through the smokescreen. Most of the MMORPG quests you do are just masking the grind. You are still grinding. You're just killing 20 mobs over here and then 20 mobs over here and clicking little doodads. And that's all it is. And a lot of the times when you get that more novel quest where you're like doing something with a vehicle, you're almost annoyed. You're like, Jesus Christ, I just want kill quests. So, like, what are we doing here? Like, a grind is a grind, and I kind of like that in Ashes of Creation, you're not forced to do these little weird quests where I'm clicking little plant doodads on the ground. I kind of like that me and the boys can just go grind in a dungeon and kind of do whatever. I kind of like that freedom a little bit. So what can they do to make leveling more interesting? Well, I think a big problem they have right now is actually communicating to the player that these quests are actually in the game. The game actually has quite a few quests, but the thing is that you just don't know. You just run past all the NPCs that have them because they don't really look any different. They don't have the exclamation marks above their head. And I think they are really trying to avoid having like the exclamation mark, the obvious, like, I'm a quest giver, I'm a quest giver. They want people to, I guess, naturally stumble upon them by just talking to random NPCs. I don't think that's going to work, guys. I think that you're going to have to bite the bullet and actually telegraph the characters that give missions and quests. I think you're going to need to make the town boards a bit more obvious and really like show that there's like things to do, because people just run past them and it's easy to forget. And you're in town and maybe if that town board did light up when there were some new missions, you would be more likely to do them and see them, because it's you don't see the thing, you kind of forget it exists, right? Another thing I think they could take advantage of would be repeatable or like daily quests with like a 12-hour, 8-hour, 24-hour cooldown. Something it's limited in the amount you can do it because it's still a sandbox game, but little things to prod you to a node you might not go to. I think that would go a long way, and that's going to be the theme of this video, is just little things to prod players in directions that they might not necessarily go, and incentivize them to do things they might not necessarily do, just so they can get their feet wet before they jump all the way in. So I think that would go a long way. And then the obvious thing, more events are coming. Events right now are super buggy. The rewards aren't great. People aren't incentivized to do them. But I think as more events come online, there's more dynamic things happening in the world. That will help. Another thing I'd like to see that I think Guild Wars 2 did a good job with would be the heart system. Except in this game, I think it should be cyclical or daily or have a cooldown to where there's little objectives on the map where it's like you gotta, call back some minotaurs and there'll be like a little heart objective. Maybe not a heart in this game, right? But little objectives like that pop up periodically. Now, you gotta be sparing with this. You don't want to have like a World of Warcraft quest map where it's like 10 million of these things and you're just doing whack-a-mole hitting them. But just little ones here and there that are cyclical, daily. They're not something you just spam over and over and over again, where it's like you see a thing, you see one, you're like, oh, let's go do that. Like, I think that those kind of things that pop up on the map, just more of those to help break up some of the grind. And I get that this is a sandbox game, but I do think there is some value to be had from just sort of prodding people in directions, right? Another big problem with Ashes of Creation is that people log into the game and go, what do I do? And this is not an Ashes of Creation specific problem. This is a problem that basically every sandbox game has. When you let the players do any and everything, you introduce a paralysis by analysis, paradox of choice situation where people just get overwhelmed and freeze up and then do nothing, or they freak out and it's a negative reaction. The lack of consistent on-rails content makes it very difficult for you to just point to a thing and say, go do that. In World of Warcraft and these other, strict theme park games, you can just point to a system and say, hit this button, go do that thing. In Ashes of Creation, the players can do any and everything, and they're not maybe doing that dungeon. They're not maybe interacting with that system in a way that makes sense. For example, if a player wants to see Karfin or Steel Bloom and they just want to see what it's all about, a lot of the times, players will just not be interested in running that dungeon because they don't need anything from it. Or if they do need something from it, they are farming a specific spot for a targeted drop. So it's really just farming like this one spot, or they're leveling and they're just farming this one spot. And that's the problem with sandbox games. When you let people play the way they want to play, they're going to play the game in the most efficient way for them possible. Even if it's stupid, even if it's unfun, even if it's the antithesis to the game. If you let people do it, they will. And the name of the game when it comes to things like this is incentive structures. Players do not respond to fun. Players do not respond to anything else but incentive structures. And they're going to have to keep a close pulse on the incentives of the game and if people are responding to them. How do you get players to run dungeons? You incentivize them. It's super easy when everyone still needs the gear and people interact with the systems in ways that make sense, but you have to have long-term incentives. And I think the game needs to have some degree of rigidity to this, because there needs to be a few select things that are consistent experiences that you can, point players to, like, go do that thing. And if there's solid incentives for players to be constantly doing dungeons, then at least there's going to be some stability and some consistency there. Now, I understand this is a sandbox game, and I do not want to log into Ashes of Creation and see a daily task list of things that I need to get done, or else I'm, screwing myself over. But I do think a few of these things would go a long way in just giving people more of a consistent, stable experience and being able to, you just sort of have to make the players play the game in a way that makes sense. Otherwise, they're just going to do crazy things, and I don't know. That is what it is. And the final problem Ashes of Creation has, which is absolutely not exclusive to them, again, another problem every sandbox game has, is the time to fun ratio. How quickly can you log into Ashes of Creation and have consistent fun? And this is very important for the casual players that log in for an hour or two after they get home from work. If they just log in again and again and again and nothing fun happens and they just whatever, they're just not going to play the game. And this is a problem Crowfall had. Crowfall could be the most fun game ever, or you could just be bored for 4 hours. Now, this is more of a problem for casual, less invested players, because the people in guilds, the people that are dedicated to the game, have had enough fun Ashes of Creation moments that they're bought in. If they log in and nothing happens for 4 hours, it doesn't really matter, because they're so invested in the game that it doesn't really, they know that something is going to happen that's going to pay off, right? But again, I think this comes back to incentives. You have to sort of prod people to play the game and interact with the game in a way that is fun. because left to their own devices, people will play the game in the most unfun way possible. I will say it does look like they're designing the game in a way to where we're always going to have something we want to do. This game looks like a game where we're always going to be broke. We're always going to want materials for tempering. And it seems to be that's the direction they're going. So it looks like there's always going to be something to chase, which in my opinion is the correct move. In the perfect MMO, we're always broke. We're always going after something we are never finished, never complete. There's always some little insignificant min-max we can go for, and it looks like they're going that direction, which I like. But again, I think we're going to need a few rigid incentive structures, and they're going to have to keep a pulse on this, and this is where I think it's going to be difficult for them, because eventually these incentive structures will wear out. You know, people are not going to be as, they're going to get the thing. And how do you create perpetual incentive structures that people always want to be going after? And they're doing some of that. You know, like tempering is kind of like an infinite system. The enchanting systems where you're blowing up gear, like basically an infinite system. But keeping people on that treadmill to play the game in a way that makes sense. For example, how do you keep people in the PvP zones, right? Eventually people will get that targeted drop they're going after. That PvP zone mob will drop the piece of gear they need, whatever. How do you keep them in there? Well, the lawless trophy system. It's good. It's a currency that drops in the PvP zones. Fantastic. You better put some dope shit on that vendor. That vendor better have amazing stuff on it that you cannot get enough of ever. I have an idea. How about you, just for now, put level 20 enchanting scrolls on the lawless trophy vendor. Level 20 enchanting scrolls. Do it. Do it. Please do it. You will get people in those PvP zones. You will absolutely get people in those PvP zones if you put level 20 enchanting scrolls on that vendor. And that's the kind of stuff they're going to have to do. They're going to just have to keep a really close eye on what is motivating people to go and do the things, and really doing their best to create evergreen incentive structures, because that's the name of the game. That's the only thing that matters, is incentive structures, because people will play the game in the most unfun, efficient, lame way possible if that's the best way to do it. So yeah, overall, it's tricky, man. Designing these games is very, very difficult. And there is one thing we have to keep in mind, and that is that Ashes of Creation is not targeting your typical World of Warcraft pet battler looking for raid raider. Like, they're just not going after that specific audience. So I would not expect them to create features to appeal to that specific audience. Now, I do think you have to, there is a needle to thread here, but you know, what is the target audience at the end of the day, right? So, yeah, it's tough. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Hope you enjoyed the video. Have a good one.